Hello everyone, this is FideMaster Victor Neustroyev and thank you for joining our webinar, our workshop today. Today we are going to talk about change of a plan. It's a typical strategic tool that almost every chess player applies in his games. Please let me know whether the sound and video quality is good. I may experience some troubles with the internet, but they will disappear soon. So people are joining. Let's wait for them. Those of you who attended my group classes, so we had group classes on Friday, and we started a new cycle we started a new cycle last Friday. So those of you who attended, you can share your experience, whether you liked it, what do you think I can do to improve. Also, can you please check if you received my email with the recording of the event as well as the homework? And I also provided you with a presentation. Okay, it seems everything is working, right? Can we continue? Okay, perfect. Well, let's start. Today we're going to talk about change of a plan. This is a common strategic tool. Well, you probably do it in every game. So when you look at the Grandmaster's game, you may see that the whole game he plays is one specific plan. But actually, these are different plans that he is able to integrate into one plan because he is a strong chess player with a lot of experience. So, and the task of a particular plan that you use is to achieve a certain goal. However, sometimes it's necessary to abandon the original plan and switch to a new one. When? Well, I mean, first, because of which reasons? First of all, because you see that your goal of the current plan has already been achieved, for example, or it cannot be achieved. It cannot be achieved because your opponent brings enough defensive resources, or because you have to defend your position against enemy threats, or you see that what you thought originally was a possible plan now becomes absolutely unreachable. Or maybe you see that some of the pieces were exchanged and this time you don't have an, sufficient resources to succeed with this plan. Or maybe you see a better plan. Or, for example, during this plan, you already achieved some advantage, and now you see a way of how to convert this advantage without any serious issues. So there are a lot of reasons which can tell us that we should switch the plan. Well, how should we switch the plan? To what? Well, for example, we can switch to the other side of the board. We can shift a focus to a different target. For example, we were taking a weak pawn on one side of the board, then our opponent defended it with his pieces, and then we shift to something else, for example, the king side attack, once we see that there are no pieces defending the king. Well, what else? For example, there was a change of the nature of the game. Let's say there were exchanges, or even the game was transited to the end game, for example. Or there was a change in the pawn structure, which now tells us that there is a better plan. Yes, a pawn move. Exactly, Brian. So there was a change in the pawn structure, or any pawn move was played by our opponent, or even by us, and it may change the plan. Activation of the king also may indicate us that we should change the plan. So well, if we see that it's the end game and we should activate the king, it does. If we see, well, we definitely should think about something else, some other plan that looks logical. If, for example, our opponent moved his king in the middle game, then we should decide what may it lead to. Can we take advantage of it instead of following our previous plan? Okay, fine. Let's start with the analysis. And first of all, I would like to start with the game between Soviet grandmasters. So Peter, or it's better to say Pyotr Dubinin versus Tigran Petrosyan. It started like French defense, so it was Vinava variation, and here you know that this is a poison pawn variation, so the best move is queen c7, then queen g7, rook here, queen takes the other pawn, then it's c takes d4, so it's quite a complicated and irrational position. But there is also knight f5 move. It's not the best option, but it's playable. So it's playable, bishop d3, attacking it. However, knight f5 allows h5, queen has to move, and then c takes d4. So c takes d4 was possible too. Knight takes, queen g3, putting pressure there. And now after g6, knight h3, yes, the pawn is sacrificed, but there are weaknesses on the king side that that white can exploit. They still have a dark squared bishop on the board. But the game here continued with g4, which is a very reasonable move, taking advantage of the pin and chasing the knight away. Well, black would better play queen a5, but they decided just to retreat. C takes d4, now the white's pawn structure looks good. Queen c7 threatening with a check, so knight e2 is a must. Knight bc6, white castles. If white didn't castle, if white, for example, continued with this move, it would be knight d4 with queen c3. So that's why castling makes a lot of sense. Well, so what would you suggest for black in this position? What is the most common plan that black usually initiates in such type of the position? Who can tell me? Okay, so Dan suggests to play bishop d7 and then queenside castling. Then what is your primary opening with black pieces against a4? Is it French defense? Brian suggests kingside attack. Okay, so because Dan is a French defense player, he knows that it's this, and some queenside play. Knight c6, knight a5, no, knight from c6 to a5, and then to c4. This makes a lot of sense. It's absolutely right, and these can be played in many other French defense positions. But this time, once we see that there is some tension on the king side, we may try to take advantage of it. So, and instead of just doing bishop d7, castle queenside, and knight a5, we may think of how to capture on g4, how to open the king's position. So here it's a kind of a dilemma, whether you follow the main plan, which black plays in such type of the position, or you change your mind and play the plan which is more common due to existing conditions. Here, definitely these existing conditions are mm, more valuable. So bishop d7 should be played anyway, and castle, and then it's a kingside attack. So it's not knight a5 and knight c4. Well, if let's say you imagine that instead of this, it was h4 played in time, then yes, knight a5, castle queenside, knight c4 is a very good plan. Yes, exactly. But this time there is a pawn exchange which open files, and we may take advantage of the enemy king's weakness. So here, because of castling, then h takes g4, white decided to win a pawn. Castle, bishop f4. This is how they try to stop f6. Well, so some would play knight a5. Others would play a different move. What do you think? Which move would you play here? Brian suggests knight g6. Well, knight g6, bishop g3. What did you achieve? Knight g6, yes, but what then? So looks like it's not so clear. Uh-huh. Okay, let's wait for more suggestions. So today we are talking about changing of a plan, in which conditions you should change the plan and how often it happens. Knight f5 and g6. Well, knight f5, it's bishop f5. So, and then it's this, because this is protected by the knight. So it's a discovered attack. No, it's unlikely to happen. So, right. So here Johnny and Dan suggested rook dg8. That's absolutely right. So instead of doing this positional plan, which allows you to improve your pieces, you'd better take advantage of the enemy king's weakness. So king h1. Now either g6 or g5. g5 was played in the game. Bishop g3. What then? It's time to take this pawn. But how? First, you blockade it. Then, if you can reinforce your other rook, you can take on h5 for free. But they already play f4. White understands that he should expand space, not only to defend his king's position, but maybe to initiate the so-called attack stopping exchanges, which will decrease the number of attacking black pieces. Of black pieces that participates in the attack of the white king. Yeah, but well, this definitely favors them. They can take with a knight. No, they can take with a bishop. They can take with a bishop, chase the rook, and put the pawn to h6 even. That's why that's right. It's time to keep the position closed and play g4. Queen goes that way. Well, if the queen goes that way, I think it is a disaster. Knight g6, queen g5 probably. What else can it be? Well, knight f5 is a move. Yes, knight f5, pawn takes, then you can try to win that pawn on h5, and the queen, well, if it's not trapped, it's almost trapped. Fine. So that's why the queen in advance escapes to g2. What then? Well, yeah, you can take on on h5 on the one hand. But there is a better move. So what do you think white is going to play? So rook h5 definitely looks logical, but once you play such a move, what will happen? Yeah, so that's right. It's f5 happens because they still would like to take advantage of these of this discovered attack. So you can take, they take, you take with a rook, they take your rook, and finally they do this. Of course, after f5, you may not take this pawn at all, but then they can play f6 even. And also their knight gets to this square, and they threaten with knight d5 at some point, with e6 later, and trying to open the position in the center and win material back. So knight f5 because of that, just to stop f4. This is where they should take, definitely. Take, well, this pawn is poisoned, because if this pawn is captured, it's, what, knight b4? Or which move to play? Or knight e7? Well, I like knight b4. Or maybe actually this move, then bishop c6 with a strong attack. Okay, fine. So bishop f5, it takes f5, c4 could make sense, then d takes e4, d4, and this is where both players have chances. But I would prefer playing for white. But they played queen f2, trying to evacuate their queen. This is how black can develop their initiative, rook h5. Rook f goes to c1. Now what? Rook g to h8, so suggested by Dan. Anything else? Knight c7, knight c7, what's the purpose? Knight a4, a5 to stop c4, exactly. This is what was played in the game, and it looks logical. But in this position, there is actually already a tactical strike, so something related to knight g3. However, if you play knight g3 right now, they take with a knight and attack our rook. That's why first we should make this move to distract that knight. Knight takes d4 and then knight g3. So here, if they don't want to lose that bishop, they have to take. Now they are a piece up, but how do they protect on h2? Where the queen goes? If the queen goes there, it's g3 immediately. The queen can go there, but then you can just play this move, rook g to h8, and then g3. So let's say queen g2. Well, this move makes sense. Maybe first this. Let's say they cannot protect it because you take on d3. So maybe they move it back to e2. Then you do this, and you're about to take and invade the enemy camp. Oh, rook f1, queen e3. We are down a piece, but the attack looks really strong, and they would have to sacrifice the piece. At the very least, we are threatening to take, then play queen h3. And once the king moves, we push g3, and they have to sacrifice their knight to avoid checkmate. And with such a king, they are unlikely to survive. So that worked, but Petrosyan didn't notice it, and he played like it was a template, knight a5. c4. Well, if not this, then this move opens the closes the queenside attack of white, but opens the position for black and allows them to succeed with the attack much faster. c4. D takes c4. So they should open the position somehow. So now d5. What? Well, this is what I call adventurous chess. So there was no immediate win after knight a5 because the knight is no longer attacking d4. So that's why taking on g3 wasn't such a big issue. That's why there was no need to play c4. And now white wants to sharpen the position to get some practical chances to win. But once he takes on a5, it's just to deliver one check. Well, knight b3 looks interesting. But just knight c6 is enough. Check, queen b8. Now, well, the queen either retreats and then they lose here, or they have to exchange. Look, by playing knight c6 move, we not only attacked the queen, but we attacked on d3. We blocked the attack through the c file, and because of that, two pieces are hanging simultaneously. So queen a8, the queens should be exchanged. Now the bishop is hanging, so they quickly play bishop f5 and king g1. Black has a huge advantage. So it's one extra pawn, active pieces, and what is more important, these pawns are mobile and are passed pawns. The rest is just a pure technique. So you see, black, instead of doing some queenside activity, focused on the kingside play and achieved already something. In order to withstand such an attack, here with c4, white wanted to create a counterplay, but this counterplay wasn't so promising. And now, when the queens are gone and a few pieces are exchanged, there is no need to continue playing on the king side, right? So even if we capture on h2, which is almost impossible, what do we achieve? It's unlikely to be checkmate. That's why instead we focus on a different plan. We transposed, not transposed, we transited to the endgame. That's why our task is to just promote the pawns. So this move anyway, bishop d3, protecting the pawn, it was attacked. Rook a2 and d4, so starting advancing the pawns. Rook goes that way, rook d8. So that move to h8 was actually useless. Well, taking there and then just bringing the king was fine, but this is okay. So what they have to do? They have to resign, actually. Why so? We are about to take, push d3, push c3, and win the game. Maybe we combine it with knight d4, knight f3. So if, let's say, I play a random move, it can be this, then this, they block, and then this. How does it work? This knight goes to f3, chases the rook away, and the c-pawn moves. Because if there is only one white rook on the d file, the d3 is no longer hanging, and that's why we can start pushing the c-pawn. Fine. So rook d3. They sacrificed, but this is a winning position. They tried to build a fortress. Well, they still have some chances, but well, now black sacrifices material back, takes the pawn on d6, brings his rook to the game, and focuses on the pawn promotion. So the number of pawns is equal, but this pawn and the king activity decides the game. So d2, simply king enters the enemy camp, and well, just king c2 move. Of course, we shouldn't give up the rook. Maybe it works too, but why not just to make a rook move and then play king c2? Now check, king moves, so we take, king moves back, and that's it. This is how black managed to win. So what did happen? The game actually consisted of 3 different plans. Here, originally, when knight f5 was played, the idea was to play queen c7 and castle on the queen side. But then, once black realized that the enemy king's position becomes exposed, black decided, instead of doing their original plan, focus on the kingside play and brought his pieces. His kingside attack became successful and he achieved something. However, a prophylaxis was required, and after the queen exchanged, there is no attack, but in the end game we focus on passed pawns, and that's why black focused on their pawn promotion. So this move, for example, was completely useless. Instead, he'd better allocate his rook to d8. Okay, perfect. That was one example. Let's continue with the next one. It's also a game where Tigran Petrosyan was played. And again, well, it's not French defense. It's Well, if I'm not mistaken, it's called Slav Gambit. Originally in the game, it was Slav Gambit. Well, here you see there was d4, c4, the pawn was captured, and then it was protected. So, what do you think? Which plan white should choose in this position? So I'm looking at your comments. Okay, so John suggests h4 to undermine the king side. Okay, so guys, yeah, thanks. So h4, then bishop f3, and to centralize the knight. Maybe you first exchange them and then centralize the knight. Brian would castle. Well, okay, fine. There is also knight e6, f takes e6, queen e6, and then bishop a3. However, you may allow yourself to sacrifice material once you see that it works, or at least you have a long-term compensation. Well, I'm sure it fails. I'm sure it fails only because they have this move. At the very least, they have this move. Now, even if you can play bishop a3 and your queen is not hanging, you cannot take on e7, but they are about to chase your queen away, or even at some point offer in exchange. So if not this move, if not knight f8, I'm sure there was a better, I mean, not a better way, but something else too, like that. So you play bishop a3, they play knight d5, cementing their position. So looks completely fine. Okay, so this sacrifice on e6 definitely fails. Let's go back. What else? H4 makes sense. Okay, and Brian would castle. Let's talk about castling in this position. Looks natural, but when there is a pawn on g6, it does make sense to undermine it with h4, h5. Also here you have to remember about this knight. So for example, if they play h5, how do you defend it? Well, if you go that way, they can continue with h4. Also, let's say you go that way. They can play this move and occupy d5. I don't think that they will exchange on g5. Oh, actually f7 is hanging, so probably they castle first, and then they consider knight moving there. Okay, so castling is too early. Castling can be played once you believe that the position on the king side is closed and you cannot take advantage of not being castled. Because he cannot attack your king, so he's likely to push there. Well, there is bishop d2 at least, but also he blunders the pawn on c4. And even if you just play king f1, it's relatively safe if you can activate your rook through the h file. So definitely h4 is the plan. Okay. Peter says here that white has space on the king side, which is absolutely true. There are dark squares that are weak, and we can somehow take advantage of it, and based on it we can combine the plan. Well, yeah, there are weaknesses on dark squares. I don't see how we can exploit them, but knight f4, knight f6, knight d6, and something like that makes sense. If not now, then later once we do this, but definitely this. It helps to support, and now we don't worry about the exchange of the bishops. So for example, if they play some random move, we can just do this, exchange, take with the queen, and our knight will try to go that way. Because every time they take, we can take with a bishop, which allows us to take advantage of the weakness of the dark squares. This is one thing. Second, we can take with a pawn, which makes the pawn on h7 a strategic weakness, a permanent weakness. So just doubling allows us to win it. And we can also play this and locate our bishop here. So I would start with king e2 move, then bishop a3 maybe, and then I would try to capture there. So it's, yeah, just I shouldn't blunder there. Okay, fine. Taking with the bishop makes sense too. So queen has to move and protect the rook. So queen c8, for example. And then I would play h5, threatening to take and expose the enemy king's position. Okay, so h4 looks good. And that's why they immediately reacted with h5. Queen goes to g3 to keep protecting on g5. And now when the position is closed, it's time to castle. So our plan was to play h4, h5, take advantage of the dark squares. Now, because they played h5, they changed the pawn structure, we change our plan. We castle. Having the rook on the h file no longer provides us with any benefits. a5. So now we see that there is a counterplay on the queen side. They are going to push before because this pawn on c4 is protected. So what do you think you can continue here? Sorry, I didn't answer to the previous suggestion of knight f7 sacrifice, but knight f7 sacrifice, I don't just see the point of doing it. Then what? There is no concrete attack. Okay, now we are here. How to play? We can reroute the bishop to c2. Okay, bishop d1, bishop c2. It's possible, but don't you think it's slow? I think you manage. Yeah, you want to take advantage of the knight f7 sacrifice. Bishop f3 swapping the bishop makes sense too. Bishop d2, rook fb1 seems to be slow. Okay, let's check these options. So this seems to be really slow. Or rook fb1 you suggest. Okay, well, it seems that they can already play before. I like Brian's idea of doing bishop d1. So let's say they play before. And then what? So bishop c2, knight f7 is coming, but there is a defense. Like, well, it's a very straightforward defense. Rook g8, but now neither knight f7 nor bishop g6 can be played. And even knight e6 doesn't look good because the king escapes to d7. Okay, so it doesn't look like a plan, like a promising plan. Bishop, okay, so bishop d2, rook fb1. Bishop f3 to change. Okay, let's talk about bishop d3, f3. If we play bishop f3, what they are likely to do? Well, they can play bishop d5, I think. Bishop d5, and if you take, they can take with their queen. Yeah, they can take with their queen. Okay, there was another suggestion after rook g8 and this position bishop a4, but bishop a4 and knight a4. Fine. Queen f4. Well, queen f4 is does make sense, but I think they just castle. And if you try to play something like that in order to invade to that side, they can just play no. Okay, queen h6 is a problem. Okay, castling is a wrong move. So maybe they well, maybe they take or maybe they play rook f8. What do you think? Bishop h5. Oh, bishop h5 after castling makes sense. Okay, so they have to take. Yeah, queen f4 makes sense, but they take, you take with the h, but now there is no weakness, so it's not such a big issue, and they will threaten with this and this. Maybe actually they start with b4, because you're not threatening anything at the moment. Yes, like that. So that's why, because black sees there is a counterplay, instead of focusing on the king side, he decides to change the plan. And he plays d5. How does it work? What's the purpose of doing that? Well, it's a little risky, but the concept is that once the e takes, he can push e6 and weaken g6. So that's why e takes d5 doesn't deserve attention. So a knight or a bishop move deserves. So for example, if the bishop move, I think he wanted to play rook d1 and then consolidate his pieces, maybe even take there at some point and reroute his knight based on the pin. That was his plan. Something similar happened in the game. Knight takes d5, rook d1, queen c7, getting rid of a pin, and knight e4. So the knight aims to get to d6, but bishop d6, pawn takes d6 doesn't look promising. So the white's position isn't good. He is 2 pawns down. But it's very hard for black to find defensive plans, and that's why practically, of course, if you play this position against the engine, he'll defeat you. He'll defeat you in just a few moves. But practically, when you play against a human player, you can definitely try this because your initiative is quite strong. So they castled. What else? On the queen side, the king is definitely safer. Because castling king side means bishop h5 immediately. Okay. Fine. So 94. I think bishop g5 is coming. Yes, John, you are absolutely right. After castling, it was bishop g5 to exchange that bishop and weaken the d6. So bishop g5, queen takes g5, a4. Why a4? Well, b4 is definitely logical, but they cannot play so when their king is on that side of the board. Because it just opens. So b4, for example, take, it's just, I don't know if this is already playable. How to play here. I originally wanted this, but then there is knight c3. 92 is a threat. So you can take, okay. Okay, no, I don't like it. Okay, it's too early to sacrifice. Let's just play... Oh, let's just play this move and take on c4 like that. Why not? So a4, to keep the position on the queen side closed. Queen g3. So, well, why? To protect d6, to be able to play this move, and in case if they give up the exchange, at least we don't lose a pawn immediately. Because giving up the exchange makes a lot of sense because they are 2 pawns up. so they can get the third pawn for the exchange, and then playing will be easier for black. Maybe according to the engine, so sacrificing there isn't the best way, but it definitely brings some relief to the black's position, and well, they are ahead because they have knight and 3 pawns to compensate exchange, and with the pawns being so far advanced on the queen side, they are definitely playing for a win. Okay, so queen g3 was played, and this is where they made a mistake. They played f5. f5 provoking knight d6. Who can tell me? Well, f5 is a mistake because it weakens this, it weakens that, and of course it stimulates white to play knight d6 right away. What do you think instead of f5 they'd better play? Knight e7. Well, knight e7, I think knight d6 check looks good. So you have to move the king. I see that you would like to go to f5, but I win the pawn, and then this pawn falls. No, it doesn't look good. So, fine. Let's continue. Well, rook d7. Rook d7, how does it work? Let's say rook a b1, bishop defense. This move, and now they can sacrifice, and then try to win this pawn back. But f5. f5, knight d6, so they cannot ignore this knight because he is likely to take on b5 and then retreat back. The b file becomes open, so the king is in a danger as well as the c4 pawn. That's why sacrificing exchange. E takes d6. Now it's time to move the queen. Where to move the queen? To such a position from which the queen can at least stop the pawn. So queen d7. Maybe queen f7 would make sense too, but at least queen d7. Instead of that, here the game continued with f4. Well, if the queen moves, d6 pawn is captured. If let's say this, then it's this, pawn takes, and this pawn is lost. This endgame is definitely winning for black. Why? Well, in fact, they have 3 pawns to compensate the exchange, because these 3 can be stopped with these 2. So there is no way to convert pawn majority on the king side for white, and this is a problem, and the pawns are already far advanced, and the king is closer to the place of action. So here black is winning. That's why queen g6. Queen takes d6. Bishop f3, putting pressure, so it's not so easy to unpin. And suddenly, because of this exchange happening, the white pieces became active. Almost all of them are active. Bishop c6, so defending here. This move, attacking there. So rook e8. Now it seems everything is defended on that side, but h5 is hanging. So at the very least, this pawn can be captured. Maybe here they had in mind doing something like that. That's why actually in the game he decided to take on d5. So Petrosyan decided to take on d5. Well, I would instead recommend him doing this move to be able to threaten there and reinforce his attack. But even with this move, I think he threatens to take, because if bishop takes, there is a rook hanging. So if, let's say, this move, then queen h5, because if bishop d5, pawn takes, and the queen is under attack. So there is no way to capture because it's protected at the moment. And if the queens are captured and rook are exchanged, then black looks absolutely winning with their number of pawns. And white doesn't have a chance to take on e8 because their queen is under attack. So king c7 would make sense. Bishop d5 was played right away. That was a mistake. So queen d5, well, it's not a threat. Rook a d1 especially, chasing the queen away. And now queen f5 offering a trade, because something else would lose this pawn. For example, queen here, then rook a6, and the king's position is compromised too. So queen f5, queens are exchanged, rook e8, bishop takes, and this is technically a winning position. What do you think? Why this position is winning for white? So the white rook can start collecting the black pawns. Yeah, so black cannot advance their pawns, and the biggest issue that is that our pawns are located properly. So this pawn stops b4 because b4 makes pawns isolated, and a3 is a blunder. It loses a pawn right away. So there is no way to progress. So the king should participate. It would be much better if one of the pawns was on the dark square and it was possible to play b4, locate pawns on dark squares, and attack light squares with the bishop. But there is a very successful blockade using dark squares. So all white needs is to bring the king. Rook d5 right away, I think, fails because of a3 maybe works. Well, I don't know actually. Rook f5 definitely fails. So let's say king c7, rook goes that way. White should play f3, right? And then this. And if rook f4, I think it's this. There is rook f6 also. Actually, what I'm doing, why do I say, well, it's already a2 and it's game over. So a3, yeah, he has to play this move to get to there, and then we can consider a2. So he goes back, and then we play this move. Right. And after he goes that way, we play bishop b1, and this is losing. So even king f1, b4 takes, c3, king e1, and just bring the king. So like that. Well, then focus on the other side play, because the king is tied down. Once the king moves, it's c1. And c1 can actually be played later. King e2, f3, f4. So, right, in this position, it's better to play f3 first. Rook d5 is definitely a mistake. f3, king c7, king f2, and now it stops b4. And a3 is a mistake too. So we don't react to this move immediately. We wait until they push a2. Actually, it was a3 played, and then this. Now what to play? Well, this move, check, and then the king comes closer. There is even no possibility to invade the white's camp to capture these pawns. So that's why the pawns are lost. So they played before, but it's still losing. So this. Well, king c4, king b2. Are we okay with that? Or which move should we play? Who can tell me? Rook now, king c2. King c2 looks interesting. Well, king c2, I think it's bishop here. I don't think it's so promising. So it seems that there is only one way to play for a win in this position. Oh, okay. Douglas joined us. This is the first time that you attend our workshops. So we are doing workshops regularly every Sunday, same time at 11 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time. So in Michigan, I think it's the same time zone. So you can also tell a little more about yourself, like what's your rating, for example. Or perfect. 1150. Yeah. Yeah, but there is a lot of room to improve it because, well, if you are experienced and well, like intelligent as a professor, you can definitely increase your rating to 1500 maybe within, well, at 6 months or 1 year. It's possible. You just need to find and devote more time to chess. Okay, fine. Let's continue. So what we should do? It seems that the only way to progress is king c4, because if you try something like that, I don't think it helps. Why so? Because, well, let's say bishop b5. It's a kind of a zugzwang, because even if you do like that, you let black to promote with a check. So that's why the only active plan is to take and sacrifice their rook. So king c4, king b2, and now, yes, you can take immediately. But if you move your rook to d1 or to e1, doesn't matter, and then they promote, and you take it, this king will be further on a1. It's further rather than it is on a2 from the place of action. And because they have to fight with the only bishop, it's hard. The bishop will be tied down to that pawn. So b5, bishop d7, b6, bishop c8. And now we just, well, this means they play here, or maybe they play here, and then they bring the king. So that's why we first collect pawns. Like that. King f5, king h5. If, let's say, the king goes the other way, we still take on h5. Yeah, we still take on h5. He takes on b6, and then we are winning. How we are winning? There, maybe king g6 makes no sense. So let's just, I mean, maybe g4 makes no sense because, well, what's the point? We can just play this and try to advance the pawn because the bishop can hardly stop it. How? Like bishop e6, bishop g8? Well, no, it doesn't work because we chase the bishop with the king and then promote. So maybe they have to play something like that. Yes, but this time the bishop has to fight against 3 pawns. And by doing f5 and by doing g6, we win the game. And the king may stay on f6 for a while because from f6 it shoulders the enemy king. So it's completely winning. That's why the black king should go to that side. But even here, it's winning too. So this move, and after king h6, he resigned. Why did he resign? Well, it's obvious. He just cannot withstand such an attack. It's a simple plan. I mean, this plan. It's not an attack, but it's a pawn promotion plan. So what can he do? Can he take there? Well, no. This, and this. And now he doesn't control the g8 square. So we can play g6, g7, and g8. In order to stop this pawn, he can only use his bishop. How? Like bishop h5 or maybe bishop d5. And both options fail. This fails immediately because you promote the b pawn. And this fails too because the bishop has to guard two squares to prevent two pawns from promotion. So king f6, let's say. No, king f8 falls under another check. I don't think it's helpful for black. So this move, and now it's gonna be b7, bishop takes, and then g8 equals queen. So white wins anyway. Well, I cannot say that white was doing everything perfectly well, but look at how the white's actions changed due to the change of the current situation. So for example, here, well, definitely h4, because we see g6 and we see the plan of h4, h5, and we also need to protect this knight to be able to move our queen, to untie our queen from the knight. So h4, and after h5 was played, there is no need to keep the rook on the h file anymore, and castling looks logical. a5, so looks like there is a counterplay on that side. What to do? Well, yes, we can play slowly, we can try to do like that, but it's unlikely to work, and sooner or later black solves their problems, and because they are a pawn up and because they have a chance to create pass pawns on that side, they are winning. That's why immediate actions are required, and this is where d5 sacrifice was played. Now, yes, so white is 2 pawns down, but it's hard for black to find moves. So, and then once we see that the knight goes to d6, which is a real problem and forces black to sacrifice exchange, we exchange the bishops because the bishop is the only other piece that can take there. So bishop g5, and then with such a knight on d6, it's very hard for black to find good moves. So that's why they sacrifice the exchange. This is still a very unclear position with mutual chances. And then black started making mistakes. So they played f4, and then there were also problems with bishop d5. So again, here in the middle game, and it usually happens in the middle game or when the game is transposed from the middle game to the end game. This is where we have to decide whether we should continue with our original plan or we should change it. Usually, once the game passes to the end game, the plan becomes completely different. We focus on pass pawns, we focusing on capturing the enemy pawns or our king's activity. Okay, let's take a look at this game. Vasily Smyslov was playing against Edward Gufeld, so the position became very sharp. It's English opening, and against English opening, black decided to play this King's Indian attack, King's Indian defense. Bishop g7, bishop b2, castle, e3, b6, so double fiancetta. Not the best way to play, so I would probably consider a5 here or just d6. But b6, d4, and now c5. What does c5 lead to? Well, this is not a pawn sacrifice, so you should understand that at the very least you can play queen e5 and take this pawn back. There is also nothing wrong with knight a6, knight takes c5. So it's not a pawn sacrifice, but d takes, b takes, and then white decided to play b5. So he opened the position in the center and probably was hoping to get a favorable endgame with 3 versus 2 on the queen side, which could provide them with a passed pawn later in the game. And also c5 becomes a little vulnerable. Not a big tragedy because there is always d6 move, but it can become the object of the attack. So a6 undermining a4. And this is where we should think about the plan. So what do you think? Which move would you suggest for black to play here? So you are welcome. You can unmute yourself and suggest a plan, or you can just type it in the chat. D3, do you mean D6? Okay, D6. Yeah, D6 and then what? Like bishop G4, maybe knight D7. Yeah, it makes sense. So you just get your pieces involved. But at the same time, you should understand that by doing these actions, you let your opponent develop his pieces and castle, so he finishes his development. Okay, so yes, Brian, I was waiting for it. Knight e4 looks good. Well, kind of. Knight e4 was played in the game. So yeah, d6 and this slow plan with developing the queen side looks okay. But there is also knight e4. And knight e4 is a very aggressive play. And if the position wasn't like that, if it was similar, but let's say there was a pawn on d4 or the pawn on d3 and the b pawn, of course, existed, then I think that it was either d5 or d6 and the queen side development, like bishop g4 or bishop f5, knight d7, and so on. But because it's more open and because white struggles with development, they spend so many tempi on their pawn moves. Black tries to take advantage of it. By playing this move, they exchange bishops and weaken this diagonal. So still doing something like knight d2 or doing something like bishop e2 or bishop d3 makes a lot of sense. But this at the same time is a trap. Queen d5 looks like a winning move for white. And this is exactly what Vasily Smyslov played and got trapped. It's not obvious that this trap works or doesn't work, and I'm sure that both players played entered this line by intuition. Black thought that probably in a positional play, Smyslov is definitely stronger, and I'm likely to lose. Um, so that's why I should create some counter chances and maybe sharpen the position or so on. And White decided, okay, so I have queen d5, I'm winning material, and I don't see how exactly black wins or gets a compensation. So that's why I definitely shouldn't trust to my opponent. I should trust to myself and calculate this line. And if I see that there is no win for black, then they lose material, and then I win the game. So this is what they were probably thinking about. Knight d6. You mean knight d6? Well, okay. So knight d6, queen e8, bishop b7, queen e7. But the queen escapes. Maybe you have in mind the idea of doing something like that? So queen c7. Seems logical because knight c8, maybe it doesn't work actually. So knight c3 can be played. Or even, okay, knight bd2, let's say. Because if you play knight c8, I have b6. Now if the queen takes, I can take there or exchange queens. And if knight takes, it's just this. So my queen is not trapped, and you're likely to lose material. So knight d6 doesn't work so well because the queen is not trapped. And by bringing your pieces back, of course, I see that you want to trap the queen, but your pieces become more passive in such a case. So that's why queen e5 here. Doing this move made just a little sense. So after that, it's this. Well, we're threatening with this, so there is no point of capturing this rook. Also, there is knight b3, a discovered attack. That's why here either the knight or the queen would take, but even if the knight takes, then it's a takes b5, and now it's protected. That's why after queen a5, to have extra material, Smyslov decided to play king e2. So he decided to play king e2. Now this move fails because of queen e4. So this is a very sharp position. And here I want you to find the only plan which works for black. They lose material, that's true, but they have a clear compensation. What do you think? So I'm waiting for your suggestions. Okay. So you can message in the chat or you can unmute yourself. Okay, Stan suggests knight c3. Yes, knight c3 looks interesting. But let me see how it allows you to survive. Okay, so knight knight c3, knight takes knight, queen takes, rook b1, and you still have problem here. And if you do this, it's b6. Maybe you can deliver a check, but it's just knight d2 and everything seems to be protected. So after knight c3, yes, I think it's a material loss because rook a7, it's b6. Oh, actually, I remember doing a puzzle in this position. So this move. But it's interesting. So, well, here queen e5 wins the game, but I'm just calculating this. This bishop takes, then what? Rook takes. No, rook takes, it's bishop c4 with a check. So I probably should take there. And then it seems that I can promote. Because how do you stop it? a8. This is the next move. And if you play knight c6, which makes sense, I take it. And then I threaten to do this move. So maybe rook a8 now. But then it's c7. And you still cannot take. And my next move is this. So I think even just a queen sacrifice works. But of course, queen e5 is a winning move. It's a check. The rook is hanging. So the game can continue with f6. Then it's queen e7, rook f7 to keep attacking the queen. Otherwise, this rook is lost. But then just this, and a new queen is on the board. So yeah, knight c3 loses material. Okay, in this position, black decides to sacrifice two minor pieces for initiative. And instead of playing knight c3 or knight c6 right away, he plays bishop b7 to lure the enemy queen to b7, because the most logical move is to take. Because if not, then it's protected and there are no problems for black. So they take. And now it's knight c6. Threatening with rook a7, which traps the queen. For example, if it's this move, which wasn't played in the game, then it's rook a b8 and rook b2 is coming. Maybe here you want to capture on d7, but it fails. 2, rook b2 check. So moving the king is a disaster. It's checkmate, right? Yes. Moving the king, that the king has no squares, so they should block it. And if they block with this, it's rook d8. It's protected by the queen. So, and then it's rook d2 or knight d2 with checkmate. So this is a problem. That's why the only move to play here is knight fd2. They're keeping attacking our knight, but rook a7. Pawn takes, Rook takes, pawn takes. It seems that white has a lot of pieces for the queen, but here they are undeveloped and the king is vulnerable. So that's why taking this into account and of course keeping an eye on the b7 pawn, black should come up with a plan. So what's your opinion? What black should be doing here? Well, take the rook makes sense, but seems to be too slow. And also don't forget that your knight is hanging. Knight d6 and knight b7. But then you let white to develop their pieces left, and they have more than a compensation for the queen. Okay, doing this check. Well, how do you do this check? There is a queen. There is a pawn on c5. So I wanted to play it too, but yeah, there is a pawn. Well, take there and then try to win it, but he defends it and develops his pieces. Then he can also try this to protect on b7. So queen b4, and queen b4 makes this knight poisoned because you're going to trap the rook with this move, and you also attack the pawn. So what they have to do, well, just developing their pieces like that makes no sense. It's queen b2 anyway, and then you take there. That's why knight takes e4, finally queen b2, this knight gets developed, and queen e1. This pawn is still stopped. So maybe g3 was a better move, and the game continued with knight c5. Rook b8, so taking there means rook b7. Was rook a2 possible? What do you mean? In this position rook a2 was possible. Yeah, it seems so. Okay, but if this move is just queen b7, yeah, then the position is approximately equal. Yeah, rook a2 was possible. So queen b4 and queen b2 is a threat. Knight c3, no, knight c3 doesn't work. There is a knight here. So what's the point? No, okay, yes, rook a2 was a good move, but instead it was knight a4 and queen e1. This, g3 finally was played. Now queen a3. Once this knight moves, it's b7 hanging. And he'd better move to d3 to keep the king safe. But he didn't. So then rook b7 just. But he played knight d7, which was possible but too risky. So rook b7 with a tempo. Now, because white wants to develop his pieces, he plays bishop h3, so it protects the knight. However, queen d6, threatening to take there. c5, queen d5. Well, e4 is a possibility, but seems that this move weakens the position. So queen d4 probably, and then rook b2. f3 was played, but rook b2 anyway. Yeah, rook b2 anyway, they defend. And what do you think, how to play in this position? Well, queen h5, yes, it's logical. Yeah, I think that was definitely a possibility. You can also capture the g3. Well, in the game, black played a different move. It's e6. So now once the queen is on g5, queen h5 becomes possible. E6. E6 also hangs this, and the c5 pawn is important, so it's better than h2. Maybe it's not better than h2 and g3 together. Now what? The knight has to move, and then we take on c5. That's why they play c6, sacrificing the pawn there. However, first check, and then queen d3. So it was also possible to take on c6 here. But moving there makes a lot of sense too, because, well, c7 is a blunder. Knight e5, knight c5 are blunders too. That's why bishop f1. But bishop f1 we take there. Bishop e2. And let's decide how to play. So it looks like black should reinforce their attack. So bringing more pieces to the attack, or yeah, or doing something like that. But how is it possible? What do you think? Rook d2, sacrificing, or Brian suggests f5. Well, f5, what does f5 allow you to do? So, for example, f4, and they have the e5 square available for the knight. Well, rook d2, what's the point? You can deliver a check, but it's bishop f1. And don't forget that they have a pass pawn. So actually, at this moment, black decided to change the plan. They were doing their attack, but they have only rook and queen into the attack. And it seems that both rook and queen are already doing their best. They are active enough. There is no way to improve the position of these pieces. So doing rook c2 in order to attack makes sense. But the problem of this move is that they can defend with this. Can they? Maybe you can try to win it, but it's rook b1. And if you play back, it's rook back. So, no, rook c2 doesn't look so well. Okay, so it was a5. Why was it a5? What do you think? Yeah, white hasn't other moves. But you'd better play a5 first. First of all, this pawn is not hanging. However, well, potentially not hanging. But it's not so important. The most important thing is that white doesn't have moves in this position. Any move that he plays leads to material loss. So the knight has no legal, well, the knight has no moves which are not blunders. This knight has no moves neither. You take on e2 with your queen, actually. This bishop is pinned. The rook is tied down to the knight, and the king is tied down to the knight too. So what they can do is actually pawn moves. This pawn can move. So they started with f4, but you understand that the pawns on the king side can be easily blocked. They started with f4, trying to offer e5 square for the knight, but f6. So they could continue with, I don't know, g4, let's say. You can easily stop it with h6 or by just capturing there. So they played c7. And after rook c2, they had to resign. So rook c2 not right away to let them play knight b8, but here, when you create a threat of taking on c7. And this is where he resigned. So king f1 can be probably played because you cannot take on d2. You have to take there. But even if you take there and maybe knight f3, it's a winning position. So this guy is still trapped. And if I'm not mistaken, at the very least, you can try this. So they would have to sacrifice. Oh, no, there is bishop b5, actually. So maybe I played this move too early. Let's do queen e4. Oh, queen e4 works because I take on a4. And if this move, then rook c2 or rook c3. Yeah, probably this. No, this. And if knight g1, because I don't see a better move. So it's still trapped. Yeah, it's still a winning position. Oh, well, he goes that way, then I can at least win the pawn. Fine. So this is how with these two pieces he managed to outplay a former world champion. But yeah, look again at this position when knight e4 was played here. So typically we know that in such position we should develop the queen side by doing d6, letting the light squared bishop out and the knight somewhere to d7. However, based on that fact that white spent a lot of tempi on advancing the pawn on the queen side, and now white struggles with development, black decided to change the plan, and this time he changed this plan and found a way of how to improve his position by tactical means. So queen d5, queen a5, and if white wants material, he has to make a king move. And if he does a king move, there is bishop b7, which makes the position unclear and provides black with winning chances based on the king's weakness and overall undevelopment. Well, I don't know that. Then you can Google it. Whether Goofield called this game his Mona Lisa. Probably. I don't know. But that was a really good game. And, well, once at least you have to see it. Fine. No, it seems like it is a different game. Okay. We have one more game to analyze, so we are not finishing. Let me just share the screen. So I'm sharing the screen, and what I want you to do, well, you know, these workshops and webinars are absolutely free. However, if you would like to support, there is a link and the button to donate. You can donate using PayPal. So you just go through this link, and then you can donate any amount that you want. Let me show you how it works. So click on the link, there is a pop-up window. Then you enter the amount that you want to donate. It can be any amount. So then you click on the PayPal button. It redirects you to your PayPal account. You enter it and send the payment directly to my account. I would appreciate any help. It helps me to prepare my workshop and webinars better. But anyway, if you can, please donate. If not, the webinar, these workshops and webinars are still free. Fine. What else? So on Fridays, we are doing group classes. Please do not forget about that. And it's not too late to join. There was only one class. So 7 more left. It's very affordable. It's less than $10 for the lesson. I'll also send you the link. These classes are devoted to how to attack and defend. So this is a program. We talked about preconditions of the attack, and if you missed a live session, that's not a problem. You're going to receive a recording at the same day with the homework, so you can recover all this material at your own pace. Fine. Also, So this is my profile on chess.com. You can search for me there, and there is a group that I'm managing. It's Chesslands Club. We are doing rapid arenas on Thursdays there. So if you would love to play a certain opening, please message me, tell me which opening would you like to practice, and most likely I will organize a rapid arena based on the position that this opening starts. Fine. Now let's continue with our other game analysis. So once again, I share the screen. And the next one. The next one is the game between Efim Geller and Svetozar Grigorich. So the position is absolutely closed, and it seems that the place of action is on the queen side. This bishop is useless. Well, not fully useless, but definitely passive. Practically, white is a piece up because of this bishop. What would you suggest for black in this position? Well, it was actually rook d1 played, and now I ask, what would you suggest for black? What would you play? Let's come up with a plan. Sacrifice to g4. Zamfir, are you enrolled into one of my courses on Chessable where I demonstrate this game? No. Okay. Yeah, it was a sacrifice on g4. First of all, there was this move played, rook a6, threatening with c6, and because white understands that the place of action is likely to be on the queen side, he makes some preparation. He plays this move, and here black doesn't see how he can progress. He can play c6, but if he does so, then what? d6 will be a weakness. The bishop is still bad. Then would it be possible to play d5? Well, I don't know, quite unlikely, but c6 is a possible. So take, then rook takes, queen takes, and then after knight d3, or even after like a3, for example. Well, I don't want to play knight d3 because don't want to get d3. So this at least creates an escape square, and then it's unclear what to do. So that's why here black decides to change the place of action drastically. And he sacrificed on g4 with their knight. Because if he sacrifices with the knight, he gets 2 pawns, threatens the third pawn. And maybe if the game passes to the endgame, he can advance these pawns and promote them. However, if the queens are on the board, advancing the pawns from the king is too risky. So here white played a very logical move, rook h1, saving the pawn on h5. The best option was actually knight e2, but for a human player it's very hard to come up with such a move because, well, who wants voluntarily to give up the pawn on h5? So rook h1. Yeah, white forces were grouped on the queen side. That's why such a sacrifice becomes possible. So bishop f3, a fork, and white decides to sacrifice the exchange by doing this move. There is no rush and take on h1 right away. So c5, d takes, rook takes, and then it was bishop d5. So bishop h1, queen takes h1, and now let's decide if it works or not. Well, it doesn't seem so, right? So if you do so, it's this, and this rook is hanging. And if rook c1, then these are 2 bishops versus 1 bishop and several pawns, which seems to be a winning position for white completely. So this, and g4 fails. Why does it fail? It fails because of this move. g3 is playable, but bishop goes that way, and now it's not possible to progress here. If g2, it's bishop f2. Maybe I'm, well, no, actually it was quite playable for black. Yeah, g4. No, this was a wrong move. Instead, we'd better bring the king. Well, g3 should be played, but then it's possible to hold. Then it's possible to bring the king and stop these pawns. Because f3 right now fails, so it should be bishop h4 first and then f3. But after bishop h4, yeah, so I was about to play this, but then it's g2. Now, what it works, so this, and this. And f3 doesn't help, king f3. So it's possible to hold the pawn. So bishop g3 maybe. And then it's this. So the pawns are stopped. The best, well, this fails. The best way is to take and then play f3. Now it's poisoned if you take with the king. But if you take with the bishop, it's not. Right, so bishop takes the pawns and then white is completely winning. So that's why maybe there was no need to play c6, but if not c6 or c5, then what to play? Because we have bishop down, and if there is a queen, we cannot progress with g4. Yeah, that's why c5, opening the position there. Take, take, and queen d7. So he sacrifices exchange back, and he's still down a piece. There are 2 pawns as a compensation, of course, but he decided to play this position. So knight goes to d3, activating the knight, queen c4, queen f3, and what now? How do we progress? g4. No, they take with a check. Trying to activate our bishop, but where? To a5. What is he doing there? b4, but b4 is likely to lead to b3 maybe even. Because if your bishop was on d4, I would not make b3 move on the board, but if the bishop is cannot enter the king's camp, then b3 can be played. So it's d5. d5 threatening to take. So it's a fork, that's why the only way is to take there. Or to capture on e5. So capturing on e5 was played in the game, but taking there means e4, and there is still a trouble. So this move, but queen f1, and the queen is lost. So that's why knight e5. Knight e5. Now what? You can take with the queen, then the queens are exchanged. Yeah, maybe white is winning. So he delivers the check. King goes to c2, and now he takes. It's a bit stronger because after queen e4, they lose on f2. But now black has a problem. They have a problem with the king. So for example, if queen f2, king goes to d3, and if let's say they play any other move, it's queen g6. So here they decided to do a perpetual check. The game ended in a draw, but let's try to, well, let's say king d3. What else can it be played? For example, queen b6, protecting the g6 square. Otherwise, if let's say queen c5 or something like that, it's checkmate. Or like that. So queen b6, covering this. Then probably knight c6, attacking this. Bishop f6 fails, right? So bishop f8, queen g6, this. Maybe queen e8, and if king g7, repetition. Okay, so it looks like it's a drawing position for both. Either black does a perpetual check, or black defense and white does a perpetual check. So this is how the game ended. But let's go back and talk about change of a plan. So first of all, here obviously the place of action is on the queen side. The attack on the king is unsuccessful, obviously. There are so many pieces concentrated. That's why just no way to create an attack. And don't forget that black is playing without this bishop, without bishop on e7. There is no way to sacrifice even this bishop. That's why what they do is sacrificing there, getting an unclear position, but this allows at least to activate this bishop. So here, well, maybe without c5, but they should open up the position because otherwise it's still the same problem. Well, maybe they take here, but then what? g4 is always risky, and if not g4, then bishop is bad, and white simply brings their knight and sets the blockade on g4, and then opens the position on the queen side, taking advantage of extra material. So that's why there should be some counterplay, and because of that he decides to open the position there. But maybe instead of this move and instead of c5 there was something else like this. Well, the only active thing I see is this. Then bishop h4. Maybe then it's c5. Take. Queen is hanging, so rook takes. Rook takes. Well, if rook takes, it's still bishop d5 and the same problem. If queen takes, then it's bishop e7, and I think it's even worse. Yeah, looks like c7 is a must, because g4 fails. That's why, at least from a completely unpleasant position where black would have to defend their queen side, they sacrificed and decided to play a two-side game with potential chances. Okay, so let's follow Zamfir's plan. So after rook h1, then rook c to a8. So rook a4, you want to sacrifice? Or maybe in this position? You want to sacrifice. Well, rook h3, let's say. Because if g3, I take on g3, or f3. Maybe you'd better... No, you cannot take. So yeah, I'll do this. And if this, I do this. If you can go back, if h3 now... Oh, it's repetition. No, I don't want a repetition. Okay, now rook c3. So, and you sooner or later have to play this move, but if you play this move, there will be a sacrifice like that, and this sacrifice is definitely unfavorable for you. Now it's losing. You lose f3, and there is a straightforward attack. So looks like your plan is too slow, because they can challenge your bishop from f3 and sacrifice exchange if they need, because this sacrifice of the exchange is in a more favorable version of the position for white. Okay, fine. So we are done for today. We did talk about changing the plan and the conditions in which we may change the plan. And usually during the game, we change plans at least 2 or 3 times. Some may say that these small plans are a part of a big plan, and in fact we do not change the plan, but actually we do change based on what's going on in the game, and usually we initiate or execute 3 or 4 plans, depending on the stage of the game, depending on the pawn structure, and so on, depending on the weaknesses of our opponent. Okay, So we are about to finish for today. Do you have any questions? Anything you would like to ask or to organize? Maybe some different tournaments. Anyway, if you don't have questions now, but you may have them later, you can message me at tricksofchess@gmail.com. Okay, who did want to say anything? Nobody? Yeah, so fine. Yeah, you can message me if you don't have questions right away, and hope to see everyone next Sunday where there will be the next workshop. Also, what else are we doing? I play in the title Tuesday on Tuesday. I will be streaming it on Twitch, so there will be an email notification. Then there is a rapid arena devoted to a certain opening on Thursday. On Friday, there is a group class, and on Sunday, a workshop again. So I would love if you could participate in at least in some of these events. Okay, thank you for joining and see you during the week, I hope.